Welcome to Wednesday News Day. Okay, that doesn't sound nearly as good. Your number one resource for the entire week's worth of VR news. You know, I actually postponed this video a day because of some very interesting news regarding a direct Quest 2 competitor that may be coming soon, but I'll talk about that later. Facebook had a massive data breach affecting 1/14 of the world's population, but there's a little more to it than meets the eye. Some very interesting details on the Oculus Rift 2 that was canceled just before its launch. That and so much more. Let's just get right into the news. Recently, one of the biggest viral games that's taken over Twitch and Steam has been Valheim, a 2021 breakout game that summed up pretty quickly is just Minecraft if you were a Viking. Well, the game has just received a pretty robust VR mod that allows you to play the game almost entirely with a VR headset. And I say almost because you still have to use a keyboard and mouse or controller to actually control the game. Just all of the visuals and HUD are set up correctly to use within a VR headset. Motion controls may come to the mod later if you're interested, but for now, this is a pretty fun and different way to enjoy Valheim and a little VR at the same time. Pavlov Shack has finally been released on the Oculus Quest store for free under the App Lab. This means that if you own an Oculus Quest or Quest 2, you can go ahead and download the game directly from the Quest store and play it for free. Previously, if you wanted to play Pavlov Shack on the Quest, you would have had to sideload the game via SideQuest, and it's always been up in the air whether Pavlov would ever actually make it to the Quest store or not. But here it is, sort of, if you count the App Lab as official store, that is. And the strength of App Lab is extremely apparent now as well. Dave Vills, developer of Pavlov, says that the player count spiked to over 3,000 players, which for an App Lab Quest game is pretty darn good. Now let's talk about Facebook and this data breach real quick before I touch on the Oculus Rift 2 that was canceled. It kind of sucks that if you want cheap virtual reality that's really good, you're more or less stuck with buying a Facebook headset at this point, especially if you don't have a good PC to run a PC VR headset. Facebook's offerings like the Quest 2 are really the only option, which doubly sucks because you're absolutely required to have a Facebook account like we all know. To most, that's no big deal, but to some, it's everything, and I understand both sides. But what does suck is when you're required to have some account just to use hardware, and that account is compromised because of a data breach or some other security problem. Now, imagine if that security leak just happens to be of 533 million people. That's just about 1/14 of the world's population, and this leak included phone numbers, full names, current and previous addresses, and in some circumstances, emails as well. And this breach may have been in 2019, but the information at the time was practically stuck behind a sort of paywall. You had to pay for that information. Well, every bit of that information is now public and free, it's just out there. But if you did make a Facebook account after 2019, then you're pretty much unaffected. However, if you start getting extra scam or spam calls out of nowhere, you might just have an answer why. Facebook has said their security has been massively overhauled since, and that every measure is taken so this won't happen again, but when you have one of the largest data breaches in human history, it's gonna take some time to forget, even if it happened, 2 years ago. But at the same time, don't be led to believe that this is some new breach. It's just a new development of old news. You know what else from Facebook I won't be forgetting? It's the Oculus Rift. I started VR on an old Oculus Rift DK2 or Development Kit 2, and I eventually upgraded to a CV1, or also known as an Oculus Rift. This was back in early 2017 when VR was fresh, extra niche, and there were only a handful of decent games to play entirely. I mean, shoot, my Oculus Rift did not even come with touch controllers. I got an Xbox controller with mine, so things were a little different back then. But the point is that the Rift name is very dear to my heart, even if, in my opinion, the Rift S did muddy that name just a little bit. Well, it's kind of official now, sorry to say it, but it seems that the Rift line is dead, at least for right now. It was announced months ago that the Rift S would be discontinued in 2021, but it was just revealed that that's pretty much starting now. This is what Facebook had to say on the matter. Quote, "Generally speaking, as channels sell out of stock, they won't be replenished moving forward," end quote. So that's that. No more Rift S or Rift. One thing that's pretty interesting though, in hindsight, is looking at how Oculus got to this point. John Carmack, consulting CTO of Oculus, said in 2019 that the Rift S and Quest, released simultaneously for the same price essentially, was an A/B approach to VR in the future. Think about it, they released a PC VR headset and a standalone headset, and whichever one did better is where Oculus would double down on and focus. As said here, quote, "The Rift S and Quest launches served as an A/B test to find which approach would push VR into the mainstream," end quote. And I think think it's obvious that the Quest and Quest 2 won, especially regarding last week's news that the Quest 2 has outsold every VR headset Oculus has ever made combined in just 6 months, and it's selling at 3 times the pace of PSVR. It's pretty safe to say that Facebook made the right decision in terms of mainstream appeal, but that never made my own wishes go away for a true Oculus Rift 2 to be released, not the budget Lenovo rebrand with a slightly improved and also missing features that we got with the Rift S. Well, turns out there's actually a ton of drama regarding the Rift 2 and the Rift S, and supposedly its cancellation right before it went into production is one of the big reasons why Oculus co-founder Brandon Irieb left the company. According to Palmer Luckey, former CEO and founder of Oculus, in 2018, Facebook canceled a full Rift 2 headset and was eventually replaced with a quote from Luckey, much lower spec Lenovo rebadge, end quote. So judging off of this tweet, a much higher specification PC VR only Rift 2 was set to release in 2018 and then again in 2019, but was canceled twice in favor of the Quest and Rift S basically. And I can't help but feel the same way as Luckey here. Imagine a world where Oculus had focused entirely on PC VR. Kind of some food for thought. Could have made some really great things, but also some bad things. And growth would likely be a lot slower, but I'm really interested in hearing some theories as to how you think VR would be today in the comments if Oculus had focused on PC VR. I personally think that VR would be much smaller and growth would be significantly slower, but perhaps a little more healthy industry-wide. But hey, that's just a theory. You know what, never mind. I think it's time for a meme break! A beautiful masterpiece titled PogChamp that I think you can relate to.
Fine, I guess you are my little PogChamp. Come here.
And now, back to the news. You know, I actually delayed the entirety of Tuesday Newsday for this bit of news, and I expected to get way more information than we actually got. But this tidbit that we have so far is still pretty interesting, and it has to do with a very real competitor to the Oculus Quest 2. You may know a company by the name of Pico. In the past, they have released the Pico Neo, Neo 2, and Neo 2i, all standalone headsets that have gotten way better over time, tracking and otherwise. Well, Pico is creating a Pico Neo 3, and it looks to be a far more consumer-oriented, dare I say it, Quest 2 style device than their previous offerings, which obviously catered towards enterprise clients. This new headset looks to have very similar controllers to the Quest 2 with a similar tracking style with 4 cameras on the device. This is a pretty big departure from Pico's previous devices like the Neo 2, which you can see here, that uses an entirely different tracking method. Unfortunately, there's no saying that the Pico Neo 3 will launch in the United States or Europe at all as a consumer product, and it may only be business to business, but I'll explain that in just a second. The only thing we know so far is that the Neo 3 is going to be officially unveiled in China on May 10th of this year. We also know that Pico's business strategy right now is to bring good standalone VR headsets to Asia, specifically China, since the best and cheapest standalone headset you can buy right now isn't exactly available in China because, well, Facebook isn't allowed in China for better or worse. And I think it's easy as Western VR enthusiasts to sort of forget the entire Asia market for VR. While it's understandable, it's very much so thriving, just in a different way than over here. And it's kind of like an alternate reality. There's no Facebook to monopolize VR, but there's also a government that censors most internet traffic in its place. But that's besides the point. We're talking about VR here. Now, if you ask me, I think Pico should 1000% make a full Western consumer launch with the Neo 3. I don't know much about it yet, but if it can come somewhat close to the Quest 2 specs-wise and within $100 or $200 price-wise, the Neo 3 could have a very strong user base in the West. That sort of device is just really in demand right now. That being a good standalone headset that isn't tied to any social media platform. And the biggest problem that Pico has always had is slowly getting worked out as well. And that's having actual content. The company has said its store has been filled with more than 400 apps, and they include some heavy hitters like Superhot and Apex Construct, so the actual content is coming. It's just been slowly. Pico also announced last March that they're opening their own publishing division under Pico Studios to make this process even faster. Not sure if you knew this as well, but the Neo 2 has always been capable of wireless PC VR play. It's one of its best features, and it's officially supported by Pico, unlike the still gray area virtual desktop application that most people use on Quest. The problem still persists though. It's near impossible to compete with Facebook on the consumer market right now. Selling a $300 device that's as good as it is, it's hard for a company like Pico that likely are financially incapable of making a device that cheap, and are incapable of finding developers willing to publish to the Pico store because they don't have a massive user base. It's a cycle that makes competition extremely hard, but I'm still rooting for Pico, and I'm very much so hoping for a Western consumer release of the Neo 3, even if it's not a huge launch. As we get more info on this headset, I'll definitely keep you posted here, so don't worry. Pokemon Go developer Niantic has always been a proprietor and innovator of augmented reality technology due to their specialty in creating phone-based AR applications and games, but it looks like the company is taking the next step in developing their own augmented reality hardware. This is a teased photo of a Niantic branded set of glasses. Now, whether these are full-on AR glasses or an AR headset, or they're just smart glasses with hardware related, either way, it's another big player in the quickly emerging AR battle that's been slowly heating up for the past couple of years, and I welcome it. But now it's time for question of the week from Dan Lima. When do you think Nintendo will dip their toes into VR? And do you think that we could see a Mario or Pokemon game in VR? Well, Nintendo has already dipped their toes into AR and VR with Mario Kart AR game released recently, and their collaborations with Niantic, and VR with Labo VR. But that's the thing, they've only dipped their toes into it. Although I definitely see Nintendo going full in VR within the next decade for sure, and unless they want their products to flop, Mario or Pokemon games will likely come. If Nintendo were smart though, they'd wait for VR to become just a little more mainstream, and they'd instead develop Nintendo VR games for release on the best hardware. But this is Nintendo we're talking about, and they don't always make the best decisions, so I guess we'll just have to see. But I can't see Nintendo leaving AR or VR in the dust. And that's question of the week. Make sure to leave your own below, I may just answer yours next. I will be streaming on Twitch after this video, so stop on by and say what's up. Also, join up in my Discord server for the best VR community on the planet. I want to say thank you to all of my Patreon supporters, especially my Omegas, like Atomali, Benji, Biz, CPCJ79, Furtrap, Fusion Oak, HCG Randon, I'm Naku, Jonathan, KR, Lucid VR, Mud King, Ridbo, Ronzarelli, welcome back by the way, Skirt Cobain, That Brock Guy, Very Evil Shadow, and Zale. I couldn't do any of this without you. Don't forget to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of this, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Much love, Thrill out.